Viewers, welcome to TV Metro Mail. You are watching Chit Chat. In our summer edition, we are trying to read the minds of our young adults, youths. My today's guest is Murto Hilali. Murto, welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me.
So, thank you very much for your time. So, you know the purpose of our visit, right? The interaction today.
Yeah, I think so. For the
Okay.
most part. My name is Murto Bilali.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm incredibly passionate about using new technologies and leveraging the impact people can make to create a positive difference in the world. And I hope collaboratively we can all do that together.
Yeah, that's great. So, again, you are born and brought up in Canada, right?
Mhm.
So, what comes to your mind when you hear the word Bangladesh? Because I know your parents, they are from Bangladesh, but you are born and brought up here.
Mhm.
So when you hear Bangladesh, what comes to your mind, or what do you like to think about that country?
Yeah. I mean, I've only been to Bangladesh a few times, always with family. So there's definitely it definitely reminds me of family. Um, Obviously, the weather is a little hard to forget, but I associate it with the very rich culture, um, very very emphatic on the arts, with the high value placed on poetry and music. Um, that's one of the things I've come to realize that Bangladesh is incredibly unique in.
Okay, so you have friends from people across the world, I believe, because we live in a multicultural environment. So do you have any experience that your friends, those who are not aware of the culture of Bangladesh, what do they think about Bangladesh? Just a brief that.
Um, yeah, I mean, actually, most of my friends are from Bangladesh as well.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
We found each other here, I
Okay.
guess. But I think there people aren't entirely too aware of what Bangladesh's culture is like. I think often, popular media is so concerned with the Indian culture um, that they tend to ignore some of the unique aspects of surrounding nations, Bangladesh included. So I don't know if there's really any sort of preconception when it comes to Bangladesh.
I think when people say Indian culture or Indian, most of the time they mean Bangladesh as well in many occasions,
Yeah.
because we have similar kind of culture in many aspects. Like if you think about the our dances, I'm just talking about the
Hmm.
performing arts, or if you think about some other aspect of our culture, which is quite similar, at least from one certain part of India. So people quite often mixed up with all these things, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So your name is Murto Hilali.
Yeah.
The Murto. So what does it mean? The Murto is it Bangla word or?
Yeah, murto comes from a Bangla word that's often used in literature, bimurto. Uh,
What does it mean?
Bimurto, abstract. So murto, which is derived from the word
Okay.
bimurto,
Okay.
bimurto meaning like
It means that
abstract,
this is
intangible.
not abstract,
Yeah,
or
murto would mean something that's not abstract.
okay.
Something I've always liked to think it means vivid, something that stands out.
Okay. Okay. So if you like, if I ask you to describe yourself in 3 4 words, so how you'd like to explain?
Sure. I think if I had to narrow it down to maybe 3 words separately, I'd say I'm a very curious person. Um, I'm a very creative person, and I'd like to think I'm ambitious. I'm curious about the world around me, new problems, and whenever I find a new problem or issue, I like to be creative about figuring out how to solve it. Um, and often those problems are pretty big, so I like to think you have to be a little ambitious to go after them.
So you said creative,
Curious and ambitious.
curious, and ambitious. Sometime, when we utter the word ambitious, it gives a negative connotation. Some people say sometimes, he's fine, but he's a little bit ambitious. How do you think about it?
I mean, I can
It
understand.
depends. It
I can
depends.
understand where people get that
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
But I think the only way you can really achieve anything incredible
You
is
have to have some
by being
ambition.
ambitious. If you don't set lofty goals, you're not going to get anywhere lofty.
So you were said that you are creative, you are inquisitive, you are as well ambitious. Whatever you are whatever you are doing, you're doing for your life, right? You're ambitious means you really want to use your life at the best of your ability. So we are talking about life. Whatever we are doing, we are doing for life. So if I ask you again, what is the motto of your life?
Sure. Yeah. I've picked up a few. I think I'm not ancient. I'm only 20 years old, but I think I've picked up a few things. One thing my dad taught me, from a very young age, is that it's your responsibility as someone who can to try to make as much of a positive impact as you can on the lives of others. So one thing I truly believe is that one of the best ways to add value to your own life is by adding value to others. So that's
That,
something
that's great. Yeah.
I entrench in what I want to do. And I think on another sort of macro scale about the way you carry on your everyday life, one of my mottos is that momentum builds motivation and not the other way around. People often think to achieve anything you need to be struck by some divine inspiration. When the reality of the matter is you just have to start doing the work, and you do a little bit more every single day, and eventually you'll find motivation.
So you said you have to start doing whatever you feel like doing, right? And you have to make others happy as well, kind of. That's what you said. So whatever you are doing, so if I ask you, or if I give you an option that the money is not an issue, the resources are not an issue, what would you like to do with your life right now? So do you have any plan for that?
Yeah, I like to think so. A lot of my own personal goals are very much tied in with careers, but I think beyond the scope of a career, uh, presuming money isn't an issue, there are a few things I think I'd spend my time on.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to get really good at teaching people things. I think education is one of the most foundational pillars of any society. So if if I could dedicate a lot
Yeah.
of time to figuring out how to do education correctly, I'd do that. I think I'd also spend as much time as I can traveling around the world and absorbing as much knowledge and experience as I can.
Okay, so before we move to the next question, so I would like to ask you that what are you doing? You can, share your, currently what keeps you busy with our audience. What are you doing now?
Yeah, the bulk of my time goes to school. I'm a biotechnology and economics student at the
Oh,
University of Waterloo. Um, I also work at a startup doing their content marketing. Um, and I also spend quite a bit of time doing bioinformatics, developing workflows, coding in the bio data space. And in my free time, I really enjoy working out, being athletic, being active.
okay,
Um, that's probably what takes up most of my time.
okay. So still you're studying, you're in the university. So I'm sure that you're looking forward to your future. I mean, when you are done with university, you will be in the, working somewhere, or you have to have your own business. I don't know what is your plan. But I would like to ask you that, say for example, whenever we plan something in our life, particularly at your age, people come up with many fears. Then, I wanted to do this, but I am afraid whether I can do this. Or the simple thing is, whether there is any fear you can see, or which can be, pulling you back from your future plan, something like that. What
Um,
would be your fears?
well, I think something a lot of people my age, and especially diaspora children, are afraid of is experimenting with their futures. Um, And with good reasons. Our parents sacrificed a lot to put us in a position where we can have a better life. And so a lot of young people feel this, I think, a certain pressure to stick to a certain path and not venture outside of it. But I think something that I've discovered personally is that that's probably where you're going to find the most reward, is experimenting and discovering new things you want to spend your time on, things that motivate and excite you, whether that be music or development or art of any kind. I think a lot of people have a fear of disappointing others, and
Okay.
it'd be good if
So
people could
if they
realize
do
that's what
it,
they want.
other people may be disappointed. That's what you mean,
Yeah,
or their parents would not be happy, something like that.
it could be that. A lot of it's
Do you
it's
have
also.
similar kind of fear, or
I'm actually pretty lucky. I
uh,
personally don't have that fear.
yeah?
My concerns generally don't relate too much to my career, and more so, um, our world at large, climate crisis, human rights violations. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Um,
You see, despite some fear, we all have. This is very normal in our life. So you are in a very safe environment, right? And you're going to a good universities. You're having good life compared to any other part of the world. Those who are going to at your age. So if I ask you, or if I request you to share your thoughts, that do you think sometime, or it comes to your mind that something is, you have many things very positive, but still something is pulling you back from moving forward or something?
I, you know, I
Sometimes
was,
people say the system, sometimes they say their family, sometimes they say the way the world is,
yeah, sure. I mean, I was born incredibly lucky, incredibly privileged. My family is nothing but supportive. As I'm a man, which means I automatically get certain advantages in certain areas of life.
so you mean that you said that you're a man, that's why you are getting certain advantage, or so
Yeah, I
if it is
mean,
a woman, then it would be, things would have been different?
oh yeah, absolutely.
How?
I mean, you can just look at South Asian diaspora culture. It's not just Bengali children. It's anybody. Um, for the most part, sons are granted a lot more freedoms than their daughters are.
Okay.
Sons
Do you
have
think this is fair?
no,
Definitely not.
absolutely not.
Okay.
And I don't blame people. These are deep rooted cultural practices, but that doesn't mean they can't be improved upon. Um, so on the contrary, I think there are a lot more things
Yeah.
propelling me forward than holding
Yeah.
me back.
As you said that you love to experiment, when you are planning to experiment something, sometimes the system or society or the culture or the government policies, give you the boundary. You cannot experiment things beyond this, right? So do you think that so far whatever you are planning to do, or in future what you will do, the system can be a obstacle for you, or the policy would be obstacle for you?
Um, I think in Canada, at the very least, there are systems in place that support people who want to try new things.
Yeah.
Maybe financially don't have the freedom to experiment, but it could be worse. There are certain countries where you can't pay $500 to try a new course and experiment with a new career path because you have to pay that much for your medication. Whereas in Canada, your healthcare is subsidized, and maybe that leaves you with extra money to spend on classes or courses. But I think for me personally, I think on an entrepreneurial level, I think Canada's on the way.
Yeah.
But I think compared to other countries, there's work to be done in making it easier for people to start new businesses and try new things on that avenue.
Okay. So thank you. And again, when I talk to people at your age, like your friends or those who are, kind of your age, I often see that they are trying to focus on their issues, their community, their environment, their country. But at the same time, we are global citizen, right? At this, in 2022, we cannot think ourselves, excluding the whole world. So when we think about the global perspective, so do you think that we live in a just world? Because when you see things are happening around us, do you think we live in a just world?
No, and
Okay.
but I think it's hard to add more nuance to it than that. But yeah, I mean the world certainly isn't fair.
Fair to many people.
Fair to many people. Two
Yeah.
people born at the exact same time can have entirely different lives based on a difference of a few numbers, their coordinates. Someone born in a wealthy North American country will live a completely different life than someone born in a MENA region, for example.
Yeah.
So the world's not fair, but it also never has been.
Mm.
But that's no excuse to let it remain that way.
So since we are talking about the world, the global environment, and people around the world, say for example, if you are given an opportunity or chance to give a same gift to everyone in the world, so what would be that gift?
It's a really good question. Um, I think there's any number. There's so many things that everyone in the world needs. Um, but if I had to narrow it down to two, maybe
Yeah.
like one very materially tangible, and then one maybe a bit more metaphorical. I think on a material level, I'd like to give everyone things like internet access, or at the very least,
Okay.
access to electricity.
Okay.
You know, it's one of the if someone is trying to ascend economically, climb up the economic ladder, there are few tools that will help them do that, as well as internet access and electrical
So
access,
you
like
want
you
to
mentioned.
give free internet access to
Every
everyone in
single
the world?
person in the world. Yeah,
Okay.
and I guess the other thing would be some more time. It, we all have a finite amount of time.
Yeah.
Makes it
Yeah.
the most valuable resource in the world.
Yeah.
So everybody at the end of their life wishes they had just a bit more time. So being able to give that to everyone would be incredible.
Okay. So you're saying the world is not just for many reasons. We can see many things around us which is not fair to many people. So is there anything you see in the system or socio-economic policy or our culture or global environment which gives you hope? Though you said that world is not just, but still that one day, the type of world you are dreaming, it will be there. Do you think anything, any hope?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
where do you see the
I
hope?
think there's I mean it's with young people. I think
You mean your generation?
I'd hope so.
Okay.
Um, and I think that's true of any new generation. It's their responsibility to correct mistakes and create solutions. I think this generation's far from perfect, absolutely, but I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's tons of smart, curious, intelligent, creative people in this generation who I think are deeply passionate about solving problems. And I think given the right tools, they'll be able to do that.
Okay, great. Since we are talking about global environment, we see that in global, we see war, right?
Mhm.
So, what is your take on war? You can see now the Ukraine war. The previously, we you have experienced at least through mass media. So, what is your take on war? And then I will move to my next question.
Yeah, sure. um, I no expert on geopolitical tensions or
Okay.
issues, and why governments choose to do the things they do. I can understand and appreciate that there may be certain times where war is the only viable option left, and that truly is a sad thing. War is never good for anybody. Sure, historically, war has led to technological innovation and advances in medicine, but
So you
if
see certain good thing, few good things about war as well. You said that that led to certain innovation.
sure, some war has sometimes led to technological innovation, but it has also led to debt colonialism. It has also led to generational trauma. Um, there are, if you think of war as a catalyst for human progression, it's one of many. There are several things that have propelled
Yeah.
people forward. Um, the space race, the Olympics. These are global events that are not wars that propel humanity forward, athletically, scientifically, etc. Um, but war on its own, just taken as a political tool, I think is, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find me rooting for a war. I have utmost respect for people who fight and put their lives on the line, and I just wish that they didn't have to do that.
So this is a very unfortunate part that still in 2022 we see war in the world.
Yeah.
We talk about war. So who is to blame for this war? You said, though you indicated that geopolitical condition, but if I ask you that directly, that who is to be blamed for this? So who would you?
I think it's hard to point to a single person. That's sort of a simplified view of things that isn't very constructive. You know, People often point to a single leader,
Yeah.
um, and once the cultural consensus becomes that this political dictator is responsible for this war, and eliminating them will end things, then there will be peace. This has rarely been the case.
That's right.
Um,
And media is playing an important role because media of the certain part of the world, they are portraying things in a different way.
yeah,
The other part media, they are saying something else.
Yeah, I mean, often to tell news stories about these wars, you need to create a villain and you need to create heroes who defeat the villain.
Yeah.
But real life's rarely this simple. Um, if we want people to blame, there are countless things. There's previous wars, there's previous leaders, there's entire political parties, there's cultural tensions, in-baked racism and sexism and cultural discrimination. These things all accumulate often to things that amount to wars. So
Yeah.
it's hard to point to a single party. I think it's often a combination of factors that leads to war.
But definitely, our leaders, I mean, the political leaders or the community leaders, those who are responsible for forming policies for us. So, some extent, we can, at least recommend certain things to them. So,
Absolutely.
if I ask you to, what would be your recommendation to our political leaders or the community leaders or the religious leaders? Uh, so, what would be that your recommendation with
Yeah,
regard to war?
right. And tying it back to the earlier question, if we did have to point to just a few people, they would be our political leaders. They hold the final vote about
Yeah.
how to go about war, if we go about war. If I mean, as a 20-year-old who is not in the government, um, I think something most people want is just more transparency. I think if governments could and political leaders could increase the transparency of their decision making, um, simplify it, reduce the bureaucracy, make it palatable and digestible for the average person, because we're all busy. Most of us don't have the time to sift through documents that are over 100 pages long to understand what this next law is going to do or what this policy really means. And I think it's the responsibility of our political leaders and our governments to simplify political information and make access to information easier for people so we can make informed decisions.
Okay, thank you. Or do you think that people like young adults like you, youth, they share the same thing across the world, or they have different perspective?
It's definitely the latter. I think it would be a mistake to assume anybody my age holds the same opinions that I do when it comes to political ideologies. This generation is as diverse, if not more diverse, than the one before it. Young people have completely different views. Some people are very much in favor of current political systems. Other people want to disassemble them entirely. I think there's definitely a diversity of opinion for young people, not just around the world, but even within our own communities. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we need that diversity of thought to come to solutions.
So when it comes to the point that to understand someone, is it easier to understand someone at your age, or it depends on their personal skill or social skill of individual person?
Yeah, I think the barriers to understanding people who are different are lower than they've ever been. Internet access, social media.
So
It's easier now than ever to communicate with people around the world who you have different views with. But that's also a two-sided sword, I think, or a double-edged sword. When communication increases, I think misunderstanding increases with it. I think it's an unavoidable part. So while communication amongst young people around the world is higher than ever, I think there's also miscommunication between young people that's higher than ever.
okay.
So I think if you know how to use the right tools, communicating with other young people around the world it's never been easier, but you need to know how to do it correctly.
Okay. Thank you very much, Murto. Thank you very much for your time and appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.